So Jennifer, you've obviously have a very significant national scope from your planning days where you ran your private firm, obviously very in depth with, the city of Toronto, and now you're obviously consulting globally to cities across the world. What are some of the pain points that you can see in terms of the city of Toronto's planning process compared to, other cities' systems? What are other cities doing better than Toronto is?
Well, the first thing I'll say, which I think is always a little bit shocking for people to hear, and the more I get out globally and work in cities around the world, I see this, is that there's a culture within city planning departments that permeates many of those departments that is, on the one hand, very bureaucratic, and on the other hand, incredibly regulatory. And you take those two things together and you can really grind things to a halt. And that's a characteristic that exists in many cities. I will tell you, it exists in Melbourne, it exists in Sydney, it exists in Los Angeles. It's not unique to Toronto, but it's a characteristic that's almost inherent to the way planning departments have grown up over the 21st century, where they've focused more on regulations than they have focused on outcomes in city building. And so what I was trying to do as chief planner was to shift my city planners is thinking about themselves as city builders as opposed to regulators. You're not someone who says yes or no. You're someone who says, how can we get this done? This is good for the city. How can we get it done? And I think that's one of the challenges that the city planning department has today, like many of its counterparts around the world, that often when someone shows up with a really bold, interesting, good idea, they still say, oh yeah, we've never seen this before. I don't think we can do that. And the problem is you want to do things you've never seen before. That's how you make the city better. But there's sort of inherently, there's something in the DNA of the bureaucracy and the traditional regulatory function that makes it difficult for that mindset to shift. Like it's really tricky to do that. And so I think that, my biggest observation would be that, first of all, city planning department in Toronto is dealing with an astronomical amount of volume, and they are always back on their heels because they just don't have enough staff. And that the very best planners, and there are exceptional planners in the planning department, have made that shift from being a regulator to being a city builder. And sometimes they end up fighting with people in other, like the engineering department. We had this in North York on the Lawrence Heights project where we wanted to put in WUNRFs, shared streets for cycling and walking, and the engineering department was saying, no, it has to be a traditional suburban right of way, like a big wide street with big tall street lights. Well, no, this is a pedestrian street in a neighborhood. The street should be narrow. The street lights should be low. It should have a sense of character and a sense of place. And so sometimes city planners really have to struggle because they're kind of pushing with other departments as well.